One. Hello and welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host. Today I'm talking to Ian Stockberger. Did I pronounce that right? Stockberger?
Stockberger. There you go. You got it.
All right. Who is the CEO at Good Shepherd in Iowa. I'm excited to talk to you. Let's start it off, Ian, with one of my favorite questions because it allows me to get to know a person both personally and professionally right away, which is tell me your long-term care initiation story. And what I mean by that is, what was your first day in a long-term care facility that you remember? And it could be as a teenager and you remember it, or it could be your first day as a CNA. Tell me about it and I'll interrupt you to get into the details.
Oh boy, this story. Well, it was 1995. I can tell you that. I was probably a sophomore in high school, and there was a gal in my gym class. I happened to ride the bus with her too, but it was a gal in my gym class. And our last names lined up together. So we always lined up together because of we had S names. And she would always bother me about coming and working at the nursing home with her because it paid so well. And I said, you're out of your flipping mind. If you think I'm going to go work at a nursing home, I'm not going to do that. And then I said, well, what's it pay? And so she kept on me about it. And finally at study hall one day, she brought me an application and I guess I filled it out and she took it in, and I'll be darned if a day later I didn't get a call from Linda DeFord. And Linda DeFord was the longtime dietary manager. I think she was like 120 years old, smoked about 4 packs a day. And I will never forget the phone call. It was, come on in for an interview, son. And I came in for the interview, and it was supposed to be just for a car. It was a summer job for the car, and it turned into 5 years of working in the kitchen in long-term care. And that's really my baptism into the whole deal.
That is great. I wonder, my follow-up question for you is, do you have a story that you remember? Maybe it was your first week or maybe it was your first month of an interaction where either you did something wrong or you realized that this was a unique industry and you were going to learn more than just a paycheck. You were going to learn life lessons. Any type of interaction with a resident that you remember from that first year?
I think it was a wave of stuff. I've got dozens and dozens of stories. One thing that was very influential to me, I mean, this is the mid 90s in rural Iowa. I worked with my first gay person then. And until then, I had never had that experience. And it was just like, whoa, this is a real life, real career place to work with very, very diverse people that aren't in my little class of 30 high school kids. That was wow. I met so many residents that first summer because I was willing to work days on the summer. Most of the kids work nights. And so I agreed to work days. I thought, why not? It's more hours, it's quicker. So I got put onto days with all of the 50, 60-year-old ladies that were working in the kitchen at the time. And they treated me pretty well because I was a 16, 17-year-old kid coming in. And I suppose I worked hard and they liked me for that. But it was really a baptism by fire to me, it started out as a high school job, and it fast became apparent to me that I was in on a career. This was a career for these people, and I was doing adult things. And then, there's the whole resident side of it as well, where you got to meet so many residents, and I truly developed an empathy of people that needed care. And I don't think I had been exposed to that until that point, of people that were truly dependent on you for something. So that was eye-opening.
That's a good story. I can imagine, myself being from Kansas, born in 80, like talking about diversity wasn't something in the Midwest we were doing in the 80s and the 90s, but sometimes when we get into long-term care, people at their later stages in life don't hide things any longer, and they're just ready to talk about things more than we were when we were in high school. So thanks for sharing that. Tell me about Good Shepherd in terms of your size, your focus, your differentiators. And then I'm actually going to go back again and I'm going to ask about how you came up the ladder and how Good Shepherd's changed over time.
You bet. So Good Shepherd, an organization, obviously in my prior stories too in high school, I was speaking of Good Shepherd. So I I kind of jokingly call it my alma mater now that I came back here and ended up working. It's a little bit serendipitous that happened. But Good Shepherd, very near and dear to my heart. Organization started in 1946. We are wholly owned and here in Mason City, so we're not a chain. We're a very large single operator. And within our framework, we have a 210 bed nursing home. We have 106 assisted living units. We have a couple of high-rise apartments, one with 93 apartments, one with 79 apartments, and then we have some Section 8 HUD housing of 48 units. And we have 32 condominium units that we developed about 5 years ago. And then we just purchased another building with the hopes of segging into some more assisted living. So all in, we've got about just under 300 employees. We've got about 560 people within our continuum of care in some fashion. And with all the families and everything, we like to say it's a town within a town of about 1,000 people.
Yeah, rather large, a big pond inside of a small pond, or a big puddle inside of a small pond. Tell me a little bit about the different roles that you've played, and feel free to pause on, I don't want to say the emotional, but things that stand out for you and what you learned as a leader as you went through each role, whether it be communication or the clinical side of things, or when you started to realize you had to look at the books as well, or marketing.
Okay. So, obviously starting here in high school, my purpose was different. I was, excuse me, needing money for a car, and a car equaled a girlfriend. And there was that framework and mentality in my life probably at the time. But I really learned a lot of things that I enjoyed about real life. I mean, there were so many life lessons to be had at that point. After, I went to community college. After that, I went off to Iowa State and went into a whole different career of engineering at the time, and thought I was pretty much done with that. And it was just kind of a good closed chapter in my life. Turns out that wasn't the case. I moved away. I did some other jobs. I moved back to Mason City, and the place I was working at as an engineer was really on some hard times. It was back in the early 2000s, when a lot of manufacturing was going to Mexico and China, and things were really on the rocks. And I saw a lot of my friends, they would leave a job, go down the road, get reestablished. That place would fall on hard times, and it was wash, rinse, repeat. And I said, I've got a young family. That's not for me. And so I started looking into what's viable in my town. What's going on here. Well, I live in upper central Iowa, where we have a demographic of many aged people, which lends itself to long-term care, of course. And we had one of the more premier places to be at. Good Shepherd, I think, is I'm biased, but I think it's a leader within the state and within the industry. So I was always drawn to that, and had an opportunity to come back and work doing some maintenance, because one of my past lives, I was doing some contract work and labor, and the CEO at the time said, well, why don't you come in and do some stuff for us? We're looking at converting some rooms and whatnot. I said, you bet, sure, I can do some pickup work. And I did that for a couple of months, and I thought, why'd I ever leave? This is kind of nice here. This is pretty good, and things are all right here, and there's a lot of good people. And so I went back to school again, and went into a program at Iowa Lakes College in Northwestern Iowa, and it was a 2-year revolving program, and really kind of got my feet wet, and went through my practicum and got a facility in Titonka, Iowa, which is 59 miles away from here. So that was my first outpost, is in Titonka, Iowa, running a 37-bed home. Wonderful experience. And so I would drive there every day and drive back, and it was like my own secret life for a while. That's really my comeuppance through it. Towards the end of Titonka, I knew Good Shepherd position was going to be turning over, and I kind of made my pitch for it and was encouraged to apply. And I guess I fooled them enough to hire me, and faked it till I made it, and here we are.
I don't know that I've spoken to too many leaders that started off on the engineering side of things. What was the learning curve for you to go into, to go in essentially to a social science of humans?
So to me, I struggled at engineering. I had the aptitude to do it. I made it through school. What people don't know about me is that I wasn't there because I was brilliant. I was there because I kept pushing. People only saw the finished product that came out of that in my diploma. They didn't see that I took a bunch of classes twice, and I took calculus three times, and that I took differential equations twice. They didn't see those struggles, and that I wasn't as brilliant as I was determined. Having said that, uh, I've always been more of a social guy than I have been a backroom bean counting, long division type of guy. But I had the aptitude for it, and so I completed that mission. I did that. I worked in the career for several years, and there was always a tickle that there was more to it. The part that's missing is I went back and I got an MBA shortly after I started working professionally as an engineer, and that opened up a whole new realm of possibilities to me. So I think my mind was more open to different things in life, different careers, and trust me, you're not the first person that's hit on that. People said, you're crazy, you're going to throw away that engineering degree. And I said, I'm not throwing away anything. I said, really what engineering is disciplined problem solving. And if disciplined problem solving isn't involved in my job now, I don't know what is, because that seems to be the theme of the last 3, 4, 5 years is disciplined problem solving over and over again. So I'm glad I have that skill set.
Are there any unique challenges and or unique advantages to being such a large employer organization, staple institution inside of your small community? And advantages maybe in that you don't have the same staffing crisis that your peers might 300 miles away, or disadvantages that staffing is harder because you're in such a small place?
Interesting topic. I could probably devote a whole day to this one, but Good Shepherd being as big as it is, at one point in time, I don't know if that's still true, we were the largest nursing home in Iowa. Certainly we're a large continuum of care within Iowa's framework. What I would call that being is an advantage 10, 15, 20 years ago is now somewhat of a disadvantage. It's become a little bit of an albatross to be that large. When you look at quality rating systems and people at Medicare, so this is kind of a broad statement, but people at Medicare, to the best of my understanding, haven't really figured out the proper use of statistics yet. And so when you look at, they would rate a nursing home on tag count. So if I got 5 tags, I might be an okay nursing home compared to somebody down the road that got 10. What they don't look at is they don't normalize that for size. So us being a 200 bed nursing facility, 5 tags might be really, really super good because they send out 11 surveyors here to survey us. So statistically speaking, we have so much more at risk. There's a reason our insurance premiums are so much more. It's because we do so much more business. So when you divide it out by thousands of bed days, we're very, very successful. But on paper, that doesn't necessarily look true because they only do a straight tag count. Our size has been good. The Good Shepherd forefathers have been very fiscally prudent. That's kind of a North Iowa way, really, with money. So, we've been very blessed that people have made some very sound financial decisions before us. That's one thing that I am very, very thankful that we have working capital to work with, because that certainly makes a lot of problems easier to deal with when you're not worried about where the next meal's coming from or where the next paycheck's coming from. But having said that, you can fall faster with a larger place, I think, than you can with a smaller place almost. As far as working conditions go, and being able to attract and retain people, our particular county in Iowa is still a declining county. The good news is we have lots of business here. There's lots of aged people. There's lots of people that need our services. The bad news is young people are not flocking here and taking up the profession. They're going off into more popular areas of the state. They're going into the Des Moines, the Ankenees, the places that are kind of booming and are chic and trendy. We are not that not that place at the current moment. So it's kind of inversely proportional when you think of a great market to work in. Yes, there's lots of business, but no, there's not necessarily lots of employees that to fill those spots.
Ian, I'm glad you talked about kind of that contrast, especially what it was 15 years ago. Given that you were recruited into long-term care in high school, I'm wondering if you have any unique strategies for recruiting it. Maybe you can no longer do it at the high school level. But do you go back and think, how do I find that 15-year-old Ian in 2022?
Oh, I think they busted the mold after me. I don't know. That's an interesting question. And we certainly do recruit at the high school level. We would like to more. We definitely recruit at the college level. We invite in classes of nurses and CNAs to certainly come through and do their clinicals and stuff here. We try to maintain a relationship with them. We really try to build a relationship with them, and because it's kind of a relationship race, right? Who's first to grab you and who's first to make an impression on you and get you in here. The numbers are so scant these days that it is absolutely the competition for people is so great, and jobs have become almost what I would call a commodity. And so it's how do we make ourselves stand out and look more appealing? And I think we do that a couple different ways at Good Shepherd. One that it is an area where we definitely tout our size a little bit, because if you want this as a career and you're in a 30-bed home off in somewhere in Iowa, you're limited. You may be a CNA, and then you may be an MBS coordinator, and you may be a DON, and that may be your career path, and that's the top. If you're at Good Shepherd, we've got 6 or 7 different tiers and jobs within the nursing frame set or the CNA frame set that you can take to, that are different, that are a unique path that you might be interested in. We also try to promote people with education. So a couple years ago, we developed an education, a tuition reimbursement program where we give anybody that comes and works here, as long as you come and you work at least 20 hours a week for us, $200 a month for education. So no strings attached. You're eligible the day you walk in the door. You don't pay it back if you walk out the door. And we're hoping that we create that relationship with people that they don't like paying their student loan, so we'll pay that for you as long as you stay here. And also encouraging people to keep going, keep pedaling, keep going with your life. On the opposite side of that, though, I might have miscalculated in my life the amount of people that want to be that ambitious. There's also the people that come here and work, and they come in as a CNA, and that's what they want to do for the rest of their life. And it's how do I connect with those people and make those people feel appreciated, that sometimes we have to challenge on. Everybody's individual.
Do you have, given that you're in so many different areas of long-term care, especially at the housing level and on the continuum, do you have employees, teammates, staff who jump around those different areas instead of necessarily moving up? They're picking up pieces of experiences?
Once in a while. The main nucleus of what we do is nursing home care. I mean, this organization was all built around the nursing home component, and that's changing. It's definitely changing because the nursing component is shrinking. Hence earlier I mentioned the growing into the assisted living more. I think that's post-pandemic. That's one of the fallouts, is people are looking for more assisted living, and there is an increasing stigma with the name nursing home. So no matter what your ailments are or what level of service you need, I think it serves a lot of families well to be able to say mom's in assisted living or dad's in assisted living rather than in a nursing home. I think from a psychological level, it sells so much better, and it absolves maybe a lot of guilt from having placing your loved one somewhere to be able to say assisted living. It's a lot softer uh,
Hmm.
concept.
Right.
As far as
Are there,
employees going back and forth, yes, it happens, but I think 95% of the time people stay within the realm in which we hire them.
in terms of kind of your strategic planning, I'm interested in if your engineer background adds a component to the way you look towards the future, whether it be endowment or construction, or the way you interpret the market and you look at, square footage. How is there any way that you would look at it differently than myself if I were in your shoes, given that I studied Spanish and sociology and you studied engineering?
I I guess I don't study enough Spanish. I study a little, but I don't. Um, in sociology is certainly a feather in your cap. I think what it does for me is, if I've been accused of anything at times, it's been of um, being maybe a little bit stoic or emotionless. And I tell people, that's not necessarily the case. I'm pretty astute at being able to remove emotion from the situation and making more of a pragmatic decision. One of my early mentors, a guy I really didn't appreciate at the time, but he was a plant manager that I had at one of the plants I had worked at, and he would always say, let's get the emotion out of this, or let's remove the emotion and then make a decision. And I ended up I pirated that from him, but it makes sense now. I get it. But what my engineering helps me do is really put stuff to paper, to calculate it, to say, does this work? Yes or no? Here's what we got to work with. Here's the time frame, etc. And I also tell people all the time, they'll come screen in and they'll have some big problem of the day, and I'll say to them, here's the deal. I'm not living in today necessarily. I'm living in next week. I'm living in next month, next year, and I'm living in 5 years from now, because long range, big picture, this is what's really happening. So the problem we have today, it may seem like the end of the world, but trust me, it's not. We're looking at bigger picture stuff. And that's one thing that people don't necessarily understand. I think until you're faced with some planning, that you really don't live in today. Today's been bought and paid for a long time. Having said that, 5-year plans are pretty much garbage anymore. They were trendy about 3 years ago until everybody went sideways. And now we're lucky at like 6 months, 7 months, a year of being able to forecast what's out there. But things are slowly coming back into focus.
I guess where I want to take the conversation is, I guess, a little bit towards your leadership style. Moving into that, I often, you mentioned the mentor. I like to kind of get into it by asking, of your mentors, whether it be in long-term care or not, but the mentors who affect who you are today working in long-term care, what are the things that you learned from them that you didn't have, and now it's kind of in your toolbox? And feel free to name the person or what it was you learned from them, like taking the emotion out of the conversation. And then I'm going to follow up and ask how someone would describe, on your team would describe your leadership.
I think when I think of my baptism into this realm and this field, I couldn't have had a better start. I had an ex-father-in-law that ran a nursing home and did this. My mom is a nursing instructor, is a retired nursing instructor at the college level. So I had a lot of influence early on that I probably didn't even know I was receiving influence, but I was influenced. And I think that helped me be able to cope and understand and not be surprised with what I saw and when I arrived to when I got here. As far as, I got to choose my mentors along the way in school a little bit. Her name was Sue Adams, and she was from Rockwell, Iowa. And it was on accident that I was set up to do a practicum somewhere else, and it fell through in the last minute. I called her on a Friday, and by Monday I was down there with her. and she really showed me the world. Very patient, very kind, very knowledgeable. I had my first regional boss over me, over the home that I operated. Her name is Mary Shoup, and she still operates a home here in North Iowa. And one of the gifts she gave me is she said, Ian, she goes, I always figure I've done a good job if nobody knows out there on the floor about any of the problems. It just appears like a normal day. She said, here behind the door in the office, it could be the wheels fully came off the bus, or we're in catastrophe mode. But as long as the residents and their families perceive this, it's just another day. I've done my job. And so I think of that pretty often, of how tumultuous things get. And you have all these 911s behind the scenes. Nobody has a clue what's going on. And then you got like the streetscape out there that's just, just happening, just everything's all good and cheery. And I think I've done a good job if I've done that.
Where do these kind of, soft skills, hard skills, analytical skills, problem solving skills that you've picked up along the way, where do you see them have manifested themselves during COVID? Can you think about when you first realized that it was serious and how you reacted? Or can you think about when your communication style adjusted quickly, or maybe the way you handled yourself outside of work and you're like, okay, I'm done with the day. Maybe I only get 5 hours of sleep, but I have a family and I wear 2 hats. And can you give me a little bit of insight in where you started to pick up on those leadership skills?
I think part of it's personality based. I've always been a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe sarcastic is probably the word. I think you have to have some sarcasm to live in this world, and you have to be able to laugh a lot at stuff. There's just a kind of an inside humor that administrators and long-term care people have. They find certain things funny. They just, the rest of the world just doesn't get it. It's an inside joke. And I think part of that's it's just built in. It's just there. I'm a people person. I can't tell you that that's something I've developed. It's a gift. It's one of my gifts that God gave me, the ability to talk to people. In fact, I was on a vacation the other day, and my brother said something. My brother was with me as well, and said something kind of, I'd irritated him because I stopped to talk to somebody, and apparently it was the umpteenth somebody I'd stopped to talk to. And he goes, I don't like to talk to everybody like you do. And I said, well, I don't necessarily like to talk to everybody, but I like to learn and I like to know what's going on. And that's how I do it, is I stop and I talk to people. So it made me kind of think on the airplane ride home of, that's how I've gotten kind of far, is being friendly with people and talking to people and connecting with people, becoming liked by people that want to spend time with you, that want to have you as part of their organization, that want to, that want to see you lead and promote your personality, in essence, is what they're asking you to do. As far as how people perceive me as a leader, I think they would say I'm mostly fun to be around. There's times when things get difficult. I try not to be, I'm not necessarily an authoritarian type of person, unless you absolutely have to be. And there's always situations where somebody just doesn't get it or doesn't want to comply, and usually that's the time where you have to sit them down and say, look, I'm gonna talk to you. I'm not gonna talk about you. Here's the problem, and you put us in a situation, and unfortunately it's my job to respond, and this is how I have to respond, type thing. And I've certainly dismissed people from organizations. I've dealt with hard times, and I've been accused of almost being too nice. And I say, look, this is a small town. I'm going to see this person, guaranteed I'm going to see this person in the checkout line within the next week. And I want them to understand what happened, and that it was circumstantial and circumstantially brought on by themselves, and own it, rather than just despise me because I have to live here. And I said, there's no reason in it, and this goes towards any kind of conflict within the organization, whether it's with families, residents, etc. I always try to make it a point to end on a lighter note or a very kind note, because I will have to deal with that person again, almost guaranteed. And I want to make sure that, I can maintain harmony that way.
And as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you how you acquire, gather up new intel, new information to approach care, overcome obstacles, whether it be survey readiness or it has to do with PDPM reimbursement or it has to do with staffing. I sense that a lot of times people, people persons, as you referred to yourself, do that at conventions. You and I've spoken over LinkedIn, that you go to Iowa convention, you're enrolled in involved with that association. Outside of conventions, do you call a certain leader? Do you read CMS religiously? Are you a person who acquires information on Twitter from other industries and follows leaders who might be in the agricultural world? How do you become smarter a year from now?
Really a little bit of all of that. One thing about being in a standalone facility like Good Shepherd is, and I was very deliberate about coming to an organization like this. It was a nonprofit, a standalone, and independent. I was very deliberate about not wanting to work for a chain, but one of the responsibilities that comes with that, obviously, is there is no clean stream of information coming to you. There's no corporate person feeding you that and sending you this. You have to have your eyes and ears open. Yes, of course, we have the Iowa Healthcare Association. We also have Leading Age that's somewhat popular within the state, but we participate with them. I happen currently to be on the Iowa Healthcare Board, so that it gives me some insight on some stuff. But it really goes back to, and I can't stress this enough, I'm not that smart. I really am not. I'm smart enough to surround myself with people that are smart. And that's what I really rely on. Nobody tells you that when you fancy a job like this or covet a job like this, that when you get here, it's pretty scary at the top. There's not a lot of left and right people to go talk to. There's not a lot of good advice to be handed out. What you rely on is the people around you and the people you select to represent the organization and to help you through this. So what I'm probably really decent at, what I've paid mind to, is making sure that I've brought the best people around me. So I have people around me that specialize in soaking up that information and developing relationships. I maintain a lot of relationships with other, administrators, CEOs, and you've got to continually cultivate those relationships, because that's where it's really coming from, is staying in the fray, staying in the mix about it, going to lunch with people, just picking brains and being open to listening to what people have to say about it. And a lot of it's feedback that we get from our families and our residents of, what they want out of life. Some of it's a little bit of deductive reasoning of, okay, this has happened in the world. How might CMS and how might the world next interpret this? And usually you can be pretty good at guessing, this is the cause. Well, here's the effect that's going to come down the road. So if you're listening to the gods and the heavens, that it's a little bit easier to be ahead of the game, if that makes sense, in being able to predict what people are wanting and needing and staying on top of it.
To wrap this up, I want to ask a question that might surprise some of your professional peers, and I'll forewarn you by giving you my answer. What is something that your professional circle might not know about you and be surprised about you as a person? Mine would probably be that most of my colleagues probably don't know that we speak Spanish at home with my wife and my son. And then lastly, the best job I've ever had outside of long-term care was working as a homeless HIV/AIDS caseworker. What would be a surprise to your professional circle that they might not know about you?
Those are interesting. You set the bar high there. Something they might not know about me is that I have a really good best friend, and he also works within this industry. And him and I have a side business moving people. And when they see me out in a hooded sweatshirt and dirty old jeans and lifting people's couches up into trucks, I think they double take, or I get the kind of the proverbial, you don't have to do that. Why are you doing that? And I say, because it keeps me real, it keeps me grounded. I love to use my hands. I love to create stuff. It has made so many new relationships for me, both within this organization and external to this organization. And it has introduced me to so many things. It has been a gift to be able to go do that. But people are absolutely flabbergasted when I tell them I have a side hustle moving company.
That's a good one. I think you matched me or outdid me. Ian, thank you so much for joining LTC Heroes, and appreciate, your personal stories and your humility and your vulnerability and also your professional insight. Hope to meet you in person one of these days at an Iowa convention.
I appreciate being here. Thank you so much, Peter.
Stay in touch.